guys, welcome to another episode of the Whiskey Diaries. I'm your host Martin Lang. We're here at Death in Texas, and today we're going to talk about a classic malt. This is the Glenlivet. The Glenlivet is a staple of Scotch. Basically, anybody that knows anything about whiskey, they will know what Glenlivet is. Even if you don't know anything about whiskey, Glenlivet is basically a staple. It is basically the biggest seller in America of single malts and the second biggest seller in the world. It is actually a really tasty, easy drinking whiskey. A little bit of history with it as well is it's got established in 1824. But the interesting story about it is that it's actually George Smith, the founder of this, was the first Scottish person to actually acquire a distilling license. Before 1823, all distilling around the Highlands and everything was actually illegally distilled. And then when the government, when the UK government and English government started imposing tax and making sure that everybody was legal, George Smith was the first one to apply for this sort of license, for a distiller license. At that time in Speyside, all the Highlands where Glenlivet is from, a lot of people thought that act will actually be repealed in the future. So everybody got really angry with George Smith, because applying for this license means that the government was proving the government right. So actually he started getting death threats and all sorts of aggression towards him, because he was the first one to apply for a license. He got the license in 1824, regardless of all the threats, and opened, obviously, in 1824 he opened the distillery, the Glenlivet distillery. Eventually, they became so famous that he, around in the late 1800s, he tried to sue the Glenlivet government to try and get the name Glenlivet registered. He won partially in regards that he was able to say that he was the only one who was able to put the name Glenlivet in the bottle, but all the distilleries around were able to do a derivative of the actual Glenlivet. So a lot of people were calling themselves Glenmoray, Glenfiddich, and so on and so on. But for instance, the most famous one was Glenmoray of the Glenlivet, because the Glenlivet is basically the river. Anyway, so that's a little bit of history about the whiskies. They produce some very light style of whiskies. They have very tall necks, long necks on the stills. They produce about 6.9 million liters a year, or 5.9, around that, which it's, as I said, one of the biggest producers of single malts in the world. About 90% of all the whiskey that they produce, they go to single malts. The rest goes to something from Chivas Regal and Royal Salute. It is owned by Pernod Ricard, and Pernod Ricard is a French company that owns, obviously, the Glenlivet as well, and Aberlour as well. The one that I'm having in this hand right now is the Glenlivet Founders Reserve. The Founders Reserve was named, obviously, after George Smith, the distiller and the founder, and it's replacing, in Australia, as far as I know, it's replacing the 12-year-old. The 12-year-old it's not discontinued. You can still find it pretty cheap everywhere around, but I'm pretty sure they're replacing it because no age statements are a big thing in the last three or 4 years. It's becoming a pretty more and more distilleries are doing no age statements. No age statement gives the distiller a little bit of freedom to play around with what the whiskey, so they don't have to put an age in the actual whiskey. Also allows them to supply the demand that currently is going around the world for single malts. Like a lot of whiskeys, distilleries are actually running out of a lot of age statement whiskeys. So not a no age statement makes sense, because you can blend it from different ages, and sometimes age doesn't matter that much. Like I have a lot of no age statements whiskeys that were just as good as a whiskey that says 18-year-old on the label. So a no age statement allows the distiller or the master blender to blend different whiskies from different ages regardless. So this whiskey, I'm assuming, has anything from an 8-year-old, 7-year-old to a 15-year-old and all that stuff, but it allows him to use the stock that they have in hand a lot more efficiently. So the Founders Reserve is 40% alcohol. It's a very soft, easy drinking. I could recommend this to anybody that never had a lot of whiskey. And even if you're just watching home, like I will compare this to almost like a table wine, in which you can drink at any time of the day. It's not like it doesn't have that necessity of really focusing on what you're drinking. It's just you can put it on a glass, just drinking is delicious. Also, second fill American oak is quite light in spirit. The second one that comes to in the range is the Glenlivet, the 15-year-old. This is obviously minimum age is 15 years old, and this gets aged in French oak. So French oak will be Limousin oak. That is basically what cognac usually is used for cognac. 40% ABV as well, quite spicy. That you get that from the Limousin. It's really, really delicious whiskey. The third one that we get into the range is the 18-year-old. This is bottled at 43% alcohol, all in American oak, and again a great whiskey. This is like the same as this, similar profile to the 18-year-old Glenfiddich. Nice and soft, easy drinking. Again, it's just the Glenlivet, they make a whiskey, the core range, they make a whiskey that is just super easy drinking. Like, you can't go wrong with these whiskeys, and also very, very affordable. Then the ones, they do another whiskey that is a 25-year-old, and then they have the 30, then they have the 40s, and so on and so on, like every big distillery. They've been producing whiskeys for obviously a couple of 100 years, but they were one of the only ones to stay open through the Second World War. So they will have massive stocks of very, very old whiskies. Now, what we're going to talk, the reason why I picked these two in particular is because they do these special bottlings that is called the Nadura. Nadura means natural in Gaelic, and what it is just a first fill, single barrel whiskies. So they do different versions. The one that I'm having and the ones that we're going to try is the Oloroso Sherry. They've been doing this for a few years now, and basically they just do one single cask. ABV is 60% and over sometimes, and it's a really good, what do you call it? Like a really good. They're really good at showing this whiskey as what they can actually do as a distillery. I've been to the distillery myself. It's a beautiful distillery, and the whiskey that you can actually try from the cask itself is actually stunning, and it has so much flavor. And this really shows what Glenlivet can actually do. Obviously, these whiskeys are great, but eventually, like if you drink them enough, they become a little bit plain. But these whiskeys, the Nadura, the single cask, is what really whiskey connoisseurs really, really enjoy. It's just that actually flavor from the distill. You can taste what they can do and what the distillery can do. So these ones, as I say, 60%. Then they do other experimentations. So this is the Nadura from, it's a peated cask. So previously, the cask that this whiskey that it got aged was had peated whiskey. I'm assuming it doesn't say here from where, but I'm assuming something from Ardbeg or Lagavulin or Laphroaig, in which they get the older barrels and then they put the whiskey. They don't put whiskey in it; they only get the peat smoke from the actual casks that they get there. This one's 61.8%. They're crazy good. Most of the Naduras, this one doesn't have the age statement in here. They said that it's bottled between the 11 and the 17, but the original Naduras that were released were 16-year-old, different ages, different times, but they're great whiskies. Alright, so this is Nadura Oloroso. What you're expecting from an Oloroso Sherry is obviously those spicy notes, that tannins, those that extra chewiness that you get from a sherry, and this high ABV at 60% ABV, we're definitely gonna get that massive sherry style flavors that you get from. You can definitely get it in the nose, and also the backbone and the flavor that Glenfiddich is. You can definitely smell it. Wow, that's a good whiskey. That's definitely has that sherry notes. Lots of spicy, and also the ABV just really gets in there. I really suggest you drop some water into this just to enjoy it. But hopefully you enjoy this Glenlivet session. Enjoy yourself, slant your bar, and we'll see you next time.